So what did you make of the inactivity at the trade deadline?
Yeah, I was a little surprised. I don't think as surprised as some. Look, at the end of it is the NFL trade deadline, and that Sauce Gardner trade, Haley's Comet of sports transactions, that you get a big deal at the NFL trade deadline. I wasn't expecting them to make a major splash. I didn't think, a starter was on the table, but especially after they moved Kyle Duggar, Keon White last week, I thought maybe they were setting themselves up some more roster shuffling like they've done back to the spring. Vrabel getting in his guys. Edge rusher felt like, and I guess still does feel like, a position of need. They're a little thin there in terms of depth. Linebacker, safety, they're a little thin in terms of depth. Running back, maybe Ramondre Stevenson, that toe injury was a one-game thing, and he's back, and that would shore up that running back depth a little bit more. But if he's not, if he's going to miss a little more time, that's a thin spot. So I thought they were set up well with 4 6-round picks to add some depth and sort of bolster the roster at these spots. The fact they didn't do that surprised me. But I didn't think they were one of these teams that was going to come out and take a big swing.
No, not a big swing, but something. There's, there are enough depth issues right now. There's enough, actual issues to you think, all right, would it have been possible, just based on the moves that you saw yesterday, Alex, and the things that were available out there that didn't get moved, for them to package up, I don't know, one of those many 6th rounders that they have last year, maybe even a 5th rounder, do something to either help them at depth, whether it's on the offensive line, whether it's on the defense, anything out there?
I thought the edge rusher market materialized in a way that they probably could have jumped in there. And, there was some reporting that maybe the Titans weren't going to trade with them, because I was looking at guys on the Titans, Draymond Jones, Arden Key,
and being
fits.
And do you believe that the whole burning of bridges between Mike Vrabel and the Titans, that they just wouldn't make a deal with the Patriots?
From what I've heard from people who cover the Titans about that ownership group, I could see it.
Oh, that's good stuff. You got to like
really
that
smart.
I mean, we talked about this last time I was in with you guys. Like, did they fire their coach? Like, the timing of firing their coach because Vrabel was coming to town.
That makes more sense than shooting your, because what's the consequence of that? Like, that's just pride, but actively, sabotaging your team in a way for spite of something that no one even thinks about outside of that building.
Outside of that building, and here in New England, it's one guy. There's a couple other, the Vrabel loyalists too, but it's like that's really personal. That's not the Jets not dealing with the Patriots and vice versa.
Well, that's a divisional.
That's
thing,
a divisional thing. Okay, that I get, but. All right, so there may have been something with the Titans. Anything else?
Look, I don't get it, but there's 30 other teams you could have dealt with too. That there's some teams that had some edge rushers. I think the divisional thing hurt them between Miami and the Jets. Those were really the two big sellers. And Diana Rossini, I believe it was, reported the Jets were not going to trade in the division. I would not be surprised if Miami kind of had the same mindset. So. We're getting those reports leading up till 4:00 that Breece Hall, the Jets won a third. It's not on the table. They're going to see what they can get. You run that down to the end. If the Jets really want to unload them, because they were doing a fire sale, does a 4th and a 6th get it done? If there's no third on the table,
no,
maybe they'd push there.
I don't think that they wanted to trade Hall for less than a 3, because I think that they think he's 24 and that they're going to bring a quarterback in and that they wouldn't mind him around. I know he said he wanted to trade. I think if they gave him a contract, he'd be perfectly fine staying. I think the Jets were pretty locked in. Believe me, after I heard the first trade, believe me, I consumed a lot yesterday. So It doesn't seem to me like they were willing to move Hall for less than a third, and I don't think there was any way that Patriots were going to give that up, nor should they have.
They shouldn't have.
And I don't think the Jets would have. The Jets would have traded him to the Patriots for a third. I do think they would have done that. All right. Okay, so they didn't do anything, and no one expected them to go crazy. Now, let's go to the reasoning for it. There's 2 things I heard yesterday, and I'm not going to lead you down either one. One is that picks are too precious to be given up, and that they are not in a position to give any up. The other is that Vrabel has buy-in, and that when you bring, and this is not something I had heard, or I've heard of it, obviously. I didn't think of it. But Vrabel has buy-in, and anytime you make a trade that takes away someone's job, and that disrupts the ecosystem of the locker room. So unless you feel it's a major upgrade, I guess I am leading you somewhere. Unless you feel it's a major upgrade, is it worth the possible damage to the room? And which one of those do you think is more likely?
I think it's probably a combination of the two, because if you're talking about the chemistry shakeup, that Vrabel was asked that question after they traded away Keon White and Kyle Duggar last week.
But he wanted those away. He wanted those guys away for chemistry. You
right. And he probably had his finger on the pulse. We can move these guys and people will still be feeling good. But in that answer, he talked about, this is a multi-year build of a program that they're putting together. And would they like to win the Super Bowl this year? Yes, I'm sure every team wants to. But I do think they have a long-term approach that starting 7-2 is not going to impact that long-term approach. So I don't think it's like the precious picks that they can't trade, but I do think there's an element of they're not going to rush their timeline because of the record. They believe in what their timeline is to get to where they need to be.
Okay, I think I'm being more specific because obviously if I'm them, I can see not wanting to give up one of your first or second day picks.
Yeah.
Obviously. I'm talking about there were people on the station talking about they didn't want to get rid of 6th-round picks. And I find that very difficult to believe that they hold 6th-round picks precious. That can't be the reason. Or unless it could be. Do you think that's the reason that they're like, we value 6th-round picks so much for our development as a team that we have to hold on to them? That we're going to be very precious with those? Maybe they do.
I that would be surprising to me. Look, if they're one of these teams that made a bunch of trades and had like 4 total draft picks, then maybe they have 4 picks in the 6th round alone.
Yeah.
And they didn't need to blow all of them. But yeah, that's kind of what I thought, right? Is if you flip a 6th-round pick for an edge rusher, or I think that the linebacker from Cincinnati, whose name I'm blanking on, went to the Cowboys for a 7th, right? Which they didn't have, but do a 6-7 swap, something like that. They could have moved on from one of them to bolster the depth a little bit. So I'd be pretty surprised if that's what it was. I just think they're very particular on the right kind of player, the right kind of person for their system, for their culture. And I wonder if that deal, for various reasons, just never materialized. I don't think they went into it thinking we have to get a edge rusher. And it's just whoever we get, we get. They probably had a short list of guys they were interested in. And if you're trying to trade for 20 players, it's a lot easier to get one of them than and I'm just making up numbers here, it's a lot easier than if you're trying to trade for 5 guys to get one of them.
Why? Mike Vrabel's a smart guy. Elliott Wolf is a smart guy. They've made a very good draft picks this year. And I understand your explanation of the plan they have in place, but why doesn't a 7-2 record alter their thinking, considering what's going on in the AFC this year? Shouldn't it?
Because I mean, to an extent, I think that it's the belief in the system. And something I forgot to mention in that too is, and this could be the other side of it, they were like coming out of camp, right? When they moved on from certain players, they put rookies in starting roles. I wrote about this when it happened, right? You cut Jabril Peppers, Craig Woodson's now your starting safety. There's no gray area about it. When they cut Cole Strange, Jared Wilson becomes their starting left guard. There's no gray area about it. They started off that, some other guys, Travion Henderson was going to be in a key role to start the season. I wonder if the flip side of this is now Elijah Ponder is going to play more. Maybe Braden Swinson gets elevated from the practice squad. He's going to play more as that 4th edge guy. And I wonder if they see it as we can move a 6 and get a veteran to fill that role, or this is another chance to give some of our young guys some exposure. And in that sense, if you believe in the guys you drafted, like you said, I think they did pretty well in this last draft. At least it looks so far early on. They look at it and they say, no, like we took an edge guy. We got a UDFA that we like. Maybe they just see it as the player we were going to bring in. Maybe he's a little more stable, but isn't necessarily that much of based on the player that we think Swinson or Ponder isn't that much of an elevation over who those guys could be.
Okay. Who just from a macro, which I love to say, from a macro look at things, who do you how do you think the league did? How individual teams around the league did at the trade deadline?
Fred, the Jets won. The Jets won the trade deadline, and how crazy is it to sit back and say the Jets won something? Look, I think Sauce Gardner is a really good corner. I don't think he's an untouchable level of player. I don't put him on the level of like a Patrick Surtain. to get 2 first-round picks for that guy. They had another first-round pick for Quinnen Williams, guys who probably were not going to be there the next time they're competitive, the way that this rebuild blew up on them. They're in tremendous position now. It doesn't quite help that the next couple quarterback drafts are a little questionable, but there's going to be one guy, at least, between the next 2 drafts, and they're in the best position of any team to go get him. They got to identify him right and go get him, but they're in great position. They weren't going anywhere. They did a fire sale at a time when nobody in the league really does that. I think they've put themselves in a pretty good position. I think the Cowboys are starting to round the corner a little bit from the Micah Parsons trade. I like Quinnen Williams for them. They're building through the interior. You put him next to Kenny Clark, and we've seen in New England with Milton Williams and Christian Barmore what a strong interior rush can do. I don't think it's quite what Micah Parsons brought, but there's a good element there. I don't know why they're making that trade at 3-5, but I think they're a better football team. I think as a whole, 22 players traded from the start of October. You're still seeing a little more of an uptick towards the NFL trade deadline being a active time, which I think the league wants. I don't think it's ever going to get to where baseball, basketball, and hockey are. It's just not realistic given the way the sport works and how tough it is to get players involved mid-season. But it used to be maybe there were 2 trades and that was it. And you actually have a day worth following now, which I think the league wants. And we know the NFL wants to dominate the calendar any day they can. And they did again yesterday.
Well, I heard an ex-GM talk about it yesterday, and he said the reason that it's becoming more and more of a real thing, like, teams making big deals, is that they have in the old days, or not even the old days, 15, 20 years ago, yeah, it was very cut and dry. Like, you didn't want to make moves in the middle of the season. Now that you have expected cost in return, there's all these formulas of the value of a first round pick based on the perform. They go into these trade deadlines with a much, for right or wrong, a much more scientific barometer on the value of return based on the player going out, and that they feel comfortable doing that in the middle of the season, if that makes any sense. It's a more finite equation than it was people, and Alex, like anything else, once the dam breaks and people start going, if you're right and people go, wow, the Jets got a lot, and I think Quinnen Williams deal, the Cowboys are out of their minds. But the Sauce Gardner deal I got, at least the Quinnen Williams deal, I have no idea why they gave that much up for him. But but at least now, that the dam is broken, maybe the NFL trade deadline becomes something where
that would be great. That would be great. Well,
I can't forget who it was. I apologize, but this ex-GM was very. It was like, these guys know the value, and they know the value of where the picks are going to be, and they have formulas that come up with it, and blah, 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 and they feel comfortable doing it. So there you go. Alex Barth, read all about it for the rest of this season as the Patriots challenge for the AFC East title. Big game on Sunday against Tampa Bay. Alex, thank you so much for the time.
For the latest from the Sports Hub, download at 985thesportshub.com.